At 65 years old, Margaret never imagined this would be her life. She worked her entire life, raised her only son, sacrificed every dream to give him a better future. And how did he repay her? A cold text message. "Mom, don't come to the family gathering. My wife prefers it to be only her family." It wasn't just about a party. Margaret had paid for that entire family vacation, bought gifts for everyone, and yet she was told she didn't belong. But the real betrayal was even worse. Behind her back, they forged her signature and secretly transferred her house to her daughter-in-law. The home Margaret built with her own hands, stolen without a shred of shame. She was left homeless, humiliated, completely abandoned by the people she loved most. Everyone thought she would fade away quietly, but what happened next shocked them all. Margaret didn't disappear. She rose from the ashes. In just 1 year, she rebuilt her life, found unexpected allies, turned the tables on her greedy family, and created a future far brighter than she ever dreamed. Do you believe someone can turn heartbreak into power? Would you have the courage to fight back when everyone expects you to crumble? If you love powerful stories of resilience, betrayal, and breathtaking comebacks, this story will stay with you long after it ends. Before we continue, if you ever felt ignored, mistreated, or underestimated, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any inspiring stories that remind you it's never too late to take back your life now. Let's dive into the full story of Margaret and discover how one woman defied the odds and taught everyone a lesson they would never forget. Before the betrayal, there was love. Margaret wasn't born into wealth or comfort, but she had a heart so big it could shelter the world. She grew up in a small town in Kentucky, where every neighbor knew your name, and every penny counted. Her father worked in the coal mines. Her mother baked bread and sold pies at the local market. Life was hard, but simple, and Margaret was taught one thing: family is everything. She married young to a man named David, a tall, broad-shouldered mechanic with the kindest smile in town. They didn't have much, but they had dreams, and when their son Michael was born, Margaret felt like the richest woman alive. She remembered those early mornings, rocking little Michael by the window, whispering promises into his tiny ears. "I will give you a better life no matter what it takes." Years flew by like autumn leaves. David worked late. Margaret took on 2 jobs cleaning homes during the day. Sewing clothes at night. Their little house wasn't much, but it was warm, filled with laughter, homemade cookies, and the soft hum of a mother's lullaby. Then life showed its cruel hand. David collapsed at the garage one rainy afternoon, a heart attack. At only 40-6. Margaret didn't have time to grieve. There were bills to pay, a son to raise, and a promise to keep. She sold her wedding ring to fix the leaky roof, skipped meals so Michael could have milk before bed, mended the same pair of shoes over and over so he could walk to school with dignity. Her hands became rough. Her back ached every evening, but her heart, it stayed strong, because every graduation day, every baseball game, every proud moment of Michael's life was Margaret's reward. She watched him grow from a shy boy into a handsome young man. And when Michael got accepted into college, she cried, right there in the middle of the kitchen, clutching the acceptance letter like it was gold. Neighbors told her, "Margaret, you're a miracle worker." But Margaret would just smile and say, "No, I'm just a mother." To afford tuition, she sold a piece of her family's farmland that had belonged to her father and his father before him. It wasn't an easy choice, but she made it without hesitation, because for Margaret, seeing her son walk across that college stage was worth more than all the land in Kentucky. She never complained, never asked for thanks. All she wanted was to see Michael happy, to maybe spend holidays together, maybe rock a grandchild on her porch one day. But life, it doesn't always return kindness the way we expect. If you've ever given your heart fully and been left wondering if it mattered, you're not alone. And hey, if you want to keep hearing stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe. That way, you can always come back for a little comfort whenever you need it. But for Margaret, the story was only just beginning. Margaret had always believed that love could conquer anything, but she never realized that sometimes love could also blind you until it's far too late. When Michael met Hannah, Margaret felt her heart swell with pride. Hannah was beautiful, confident, the kind of woman who walked into a room and everyone noticed she was everything Margaret wasn't: elegant, fashionable, with polished nails and designer handbags. At first, Margaret was just happy her son had found someone. She baked her famous pecan pie for Hannah, invited her over for Sunday dinners, even gifted her a delicate necklace from her own jewelry box. But slowly, the warmth began to fade. Hannah didn't like the small house. She called it quaint, but the way she said it felt like an insult dressed as a compliment. She didn't like home-cooked meals, preferring takeout from upscale restaurants in the city. And most of all, Hannah didn't like spending too much time with Margaret still. Margaret stayed quiet, she told herself. Michael's happy. That's all that matters. But things started changing. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became rarer. Holidays felt colder. And then the first real wound came. It was Thanksgiving. Margaret spent 3 days preparing everything from scratch. Roasted turkey, buttery mashed potatoes, sweet potato casserole with golden marshmallows on top. All Michael's childhood favorites. She even ironed the linen napkins she kept for special occasions. Set the table like it was a royal banquet. But 2 hours before dinner, her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Mom, we can't make it this year. Hannah's family is doing a family-only dinner. Hope you understand. Margaret stared at the screen, her hands trembling, the smell of fresh pies filling the empty house. She sat alone at the perfectly set table, the turkey untouched, the candles flickering, the silence deafening. That was the moment something cracked inside her still. She forgave, because that's what mothers do, right? But the cracks only grew wider. A few months later, Margaret received a letter from the bank. It was a foreclosure notice. Confused, she rushed to the bank, only to hear words that made her knees weak. Ma'am, your house is no longer under your name. How Margaret had never missed a payment? She had no debts. She owned the house outright. The manager pulled out the file, showed her documents. Signed, sealed. Transferred to Michael and Hannah. Margaret felt her world spin. That's impossible. I never signed anything, she whispered, but there was her name, her signature, on every page, only it wasn't hers. It was forged her son. Her only son had forged her signature to transfer the very roof over her head into his wife's name, the home she built. With sweat, with sacrifice, with decades of love, stolen, like it was nothing more than a piece of paper, and the worst part, they didn't even have the decency to tell her. Margaret went home that night, sat on the porch, staring at the old oak tree David had planted before he died, wondering, how did it come to this? How does a mother give everything only to be tossed aside like yesterday's trash? Her hands, once strong, felt so small. Her heart, once full, felt so empty. And yet, even through the betrayal, she told herself, I'll survive. I always have. If this story touches your heart or reminds you of someone you know, consider subscribing. That way you can always find your way back to these stories of love, loss, and strength. But what Margaret didn't know was that life wasn't finished with her yet. The storm was only beginning. Margaret always thought losing her husband was the worst pain she would ever feel. But standing outside her own home, clutching a suitcase that barely held her life, she realized some heartbreaks come when you least expect it. She didn't even get a proper warning one morning. She came back from her shift at the diner, only to find the locks changed, and a young man, someone she didn't even know, telling her, sorry ma'am, new owners, you gotta leave. Her own son didn't even have the courage to tell her in person. The neighbors, they peeked through their curtains, whispered behind closed doors, but no one came to ask if she was okay. In a matter of hours, Margaret became homeless. At 65, she walked to the park, sat on the same bench where she used to watch Michael play as a boy, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to cry without holding back. The kind of tears that come from your soul, that burn your chest, and leave your heart completely hollow. She slept in a small shelter that night, surrounded by strangers. The stale smell of old blankets, the distant sound of muffled sobs from women who had stories heartbreakingly similar to hers. In the morning, Margaret washed her face in a cracked mirror, tried to fix her hair to look less broken, but no amount of brushing could hide the truth. The woman staring back wasn't the vibrant mother she once was. She was a forgotten woman, invisible in the world she gave everything to. Days turned into weeks. She found small jobs, cleaning offices at night, restocking shelves before sunrise, anything to survive. Sometimes she would pass by the diner where she used to work, watch people laugh over coffee and pancakes, and pretend just for a moment that she still had a place, still had a life. One day, as she sat outside a coffee shop counting loose change, a young couple walked by. The woman glanced at Margaret, wrinkled her nose, and whispered to her boyfriend, "Ugh, these old people should just disappear." Margaret felt her cheeks burn, her heart tighten. She wasn't angry, she was defeated. But just as she lowered her head, a little boy walked up, handed her a chocolate chip cookie, and smiled. "You remind me of my grandma," he said softly, before running back to his mother, and for the first time in weeks, Margaret smiled. It was small, it was fragile, but it was real, because deep down, even when the world turns its back on you, kindness still exists. She knew. She couldn't give up. David wouldn't want that. The old Margaret wouldn't allow it. And that little boy's innocent smile reminded her. There was still a spark inside her. If you've ever felt overlooked or forgotten, I hope this story reminds you. Your worth isn't measured by others, it's built within you. And if you'd like to keep these powerful stories close, feel free to subscribe. That way, whenever life feels heavy, you'll always have a story to lift you up, because Margaret's journey was far from over. Just when Margaret thought the world had forgotten her fate, sent her an unexpected visitor. It was a gray afternoon. When Margaret sat at her usual spot by the bus stop, hoping to pick up a few cleaning shifts, at the local grocery store, an older man dressed in a simple blue suit walked past her, then suddenly stopped, turned back. His voice filled with genuine surprise. She squinted, her eyes tired from long days and longer nights. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" A warm smile spread across his weathered face. "Maybe you don't remember me, but I remember you very well." His name was Mr. Lawrence. 30 years ago, Margaret had helped his wife during a terrible winter, cooked them hot meals, even babysat their little girl for free when they couldn't afford childcare back then. Mr. Lawrence was just a struggling young man trying to make ends meet, but now, he owned a series of retirement homes along the coast, had built his life but never forgot the kindness of a woman who didn't even hesitate to help. Margaret blinked, memories flooding back. Mr. Lawrence sat beside her, and for the first time in weeks, Margaret felt seen. Really seen. Then came his offer. "I own a small retirement community in a quiet seaside town, just a couple of hours from here, and I need someone with heart, someone I can trust to help me manage it." Margaret hesitated. After everything, could she trust again? But Mr. Lawrence continued. "You'll have a place to stay, honest work, and people who will appreciate you. You won't be invisible there, Margaret." Tears prickled her eyes this time, and the next morning boarded the earliest bus, heading toward a new beginning. The town was small, but it was hers. A cozy room, a soft bed, a window that opened to the ocean. Margaret walked through the retirement community, greeted by cheerful faces, friendly chatter, and a sense of belonging. She was introduced as Mrs. Margaret, but for company, for comfort, of course. The job wasn't always easy. There was Mrs. Perkins, who complained every day about the soup being too salty. Mr. Doyle, who liked to hide the TV remote and pretend he didn't know where it went. And the twins, Betty and Dot, who constantly bickered over who had the better-looking husband. Back in the 60s South, Margaret laughed more in 1 week than she had in the past 5 years. She remembered how good it felt. As she sat on the porch, watching the sun dip into the horizon, Mr. Lawrence joined her, a quiet smile on his face. See, betrayed, left to crumble. But life had offered her a second chance. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to take it. If you've ever been at your lowest, and life surprised you with a little kindness, you know exactly how Margaret felt. And if you want these stories closed, just hit subscribe, so they're always waiting. Whenever you need a reminder that better days do come. But Margaret's journey was far from finished, because destiny still had plans for her. Every morning, Margaret woke up to the sound of waves crashing softly against the shore. And for the first time in a long time, she woke up with purpose. Gone were the sleepless nights on shelter floors, the empty fridge, the cold silence of a forgotten home. Here in this little seaside town, helping the elderly residents, organizing little events, reading aloud in the evenings, she became something of a legend in the home. When young, cocky nurses tried to skip shifts, Margaret had a way of raising just one eyebrow that could send them scurrying back to work faster than the speed of gossip. Residents adored her. Mrs. Perkins, who once complained about everything, finally admitted where he hid the TV remote under his pillow. They adopted Margaret as their bonus sister, dragging her into their endless debates about who aged more gracefully. For the first time in years, Margaret wasn't a burden or an afterthought. She was family. But Margaret was never one to settle. Her father had once told her, "When life knocks you down, girl, you build something even stronger from the ground up." And that's exactly what she did. She noticed the small, vacant cafe right across from the retirement home, dusty windows, peeling paint. Could be more than just a building. It could be a home for laughter, for memories, for second chances. She used her modest salary, some savings Mr. Lawrence kindly advanced her, and put her heart into bringing the place back to life. The townspeople watched in curiosity. Some whispered, "Why would a woman her age bother?" Others smiled knowingly. Months. Seaside Comfort Cafe opened its doors, and oh, what a hit it was. The smell of fresh cinnamon rolls drifted down the streets. The sounds of classic rock from the jukebox pulled in everyone from teenagers to truck drivers, and the golden-framed photo of David smiling from the wall reminded Margaret every day. She served comfort. Locals came to share stories. The elderly felt young again. Kids giggled over chocolate sundaes, and tourists snapped photos of the woman with the brightest smile behind the counter, and life got sweeter. On weekends, she hosted karaoke nights. She even sang herself off-key, but full of spirit, making everyone laugh till their sides hurt once. A tourist couple asked her, "What's your secret to staying so joyful at your age?" Margaret winked and said, "Sweet tea, good pie, and refusing to let life steal your sparkle." The cafe became the beating heart of the town, and Margaret, the soul everyone admired, she had risen, stronger, richer, and far more joyful than the one she lost. Her laughter echoed louder. Her heart felt fuller, and every night as she locked up her cafe, "I'm not just surviving, I'm living." If you ever need a little reminder that it's never too late to rebuild, just subscribe, because these stories will always remind you your best chapters might still be ahead, but Margaret's journey still had one more twist in store, because sometimes the past has a funny way of walking right back into your life. Life has a strange sense of humor. Margaret was busy polishing the countertop of her bustling little cafe, humming to the old jukebox tunes, when the door jingled open and in walked the ghosts of her past, Michael and Hannah. They stood there dressed in designer coats, their faces slightly worn, but their airs of entitlement unchanged. They didn't recognize her. Not at first. Margaret watched from behind the counter, a strange calm settling over her chest. It had been years, but some wounds, they didn't fade. She listened as Hannah complained loudly. "This town is so boring. I can't believe we have to stop here. Let's just grab coffee and leave." Michael shrugged. "Whatever. Let's just eat quickly." Margaret took a deep breath, straightened her apron, and walked up to them with a smile. "Welcome to Seaside Comfort Caf. What can I get you folks today?" Michael blinked. Something about her voice, her eyes, tugged at his memory. But Hannah was too busy flipping through her phone. "I'll have an almond milk cappuccino, and whatever's your least greasy breakfast option." Margaret's lips curled. "We don't do almond milk, but we make the fluffiest buttermilk pancakes in town, with extra butter, just the way my son used to love them." Michael's head snapped up, his eyes locked on hers, recognition dawning, horror creeping into his expression. Mom," Hannah scoffed. "That's your mom?" Margaret stood tall, shoulders back, heart steady. "Funny, isn't it? How the woman you threw away now owns the cafe you just stumbled into?" Michael stammered. "We didn't? It wasn't?" But Margaret wasn't interested in excuses. Not anymore. Later that evening, curiosity got the better of her. She looked up their names in public records, and what she found almost made her laugh out loud. Michael and Hannah were drowning in debt, their fancy cars repossessed, their suburban mansion foreclosed. And guess who had been quietly investing, learning, and even consulting with local attorneys over the past few years? Margaret, for the first time in forever. Margaret wasn't a victim. She held the power. She gathered every document, every forged signature, every illegal transfer deed, and paid a visit to the best attorney in town, Mr. Curtis, who happened to be the son of a woman Margaret cared for at the retirement home. Mr. Curtis listened, eyebrows rising higher with each paper, before leaning back with a grin. "Margaret, this is textbook fraud. You're going to win, and we're going to make sure they pay." Margaret chuckled. Make sure they pay. Properly, weeks turned into months. And soon, Michael and Hannah found themselves slapped with legal papers in court. Margaret walked in, wearing the same confident smile she wore behind her cafe counter. Chin high, steps steady. Hannah tried her usual theatrics. Fake tears, flimsy excuses. But the judge was unimpressed. Michael fumbled, blamed youthful mistakes, but the forged signatures, the fraudulent house transfer, the cruel eviction, all spoke louder than any apology. And when the verdict came, Margaret didn't flinch. Full ownership of her old home, restored financial compensation granted, and the cherry on top, a hefty fine for damages outside the courtroom. Reporters swarmed. Margaret simply said, "When you think someone is weak, think again." That night, back in her cafe, regulars toasted to her victory. Mr. Doyle did a happy dance. Mrs. Perkins baked a victory pie. Even Betty and Dot agreed this was better than any soap opera they'd ever watched. Margaret smiled, the deepest smile she had felt in years. She didn't just get justice, she got closure, and maybe, just maybe, life was finally on her side. If you believe in karma and second chances, and in standing up for yourself, don't forget to subscribe, because there are more powerful stories waiting for you, right here. But Margaret had one last surprise left, and it was something no one, not even she, expected. The courtroom was packed that morning, a quiet buzz of curiosity filling the air. Local reporters had caught wind of the story. Elderly woman fights back against family fraud, and suddenly, everyone wanted to see how it would end. Margaret walked through those courtroom doors, her head held high, wearing a soft blue suit she'd bought just for this day. Behind her, a quiet army of support: Mr. Lawrence, Betty, and Dot. Even Mr. Doyle, wearing his favorite baseball cap that read, "Justice served daily." On the other side of the room, Michael sat pale, nervously tapping his foot. Hannah fidgeted with her purse, lips pursed, confidence cracking. Margaret took her seat. Her lawyer, Mr. Curtis, leaned in with a reassuring nod. "You've got this, Margaret. They've underestimated the wrong woman." The trial began. Hannah tried the usual act: fake tears, dramatic sighs. "Blaming miscommunication, I always thought. The house was a gift," she sobbed, clutching a designer handkerchief. The judge raised a single eyebrow, unimpressed. Then came Michael, his voice shaky, his words empty. I thought it'd be easier to handle the property under our name, to help Mom financially." But when the forged signatures were displayed on the projector, and the forensic handwriting expert testified, Michael's excuses fell apart. Like a cheap deck of cards, Margaret stayed silent, watching it all unfold, knowing the truth was finally louder than their lies. Then it was Margaret's turn. She stood, walked to the stand, and told her story. From the cold Thanksgiving alone, to the eviction, the nights on a park bench, and the journey to rebuild her life. Her voice didn't crack, but her words hit hard, every sentence landing in the room like thunder. "You don't just steal a house," she said softly. "You steal memories, dignity, and trust." The courtroom was silent. The judge leaned forward, taking in every word. Margaret ended with one simple sentence, but they forgot something. "I'm not weak, and I'm not done." By the time the closing arguments finished, everyone in that room already knew the verdict. The judge didn't hesitate. Full restitution of the property, maximum damages awarded, and a personal apology ordered. Right there in court, Hannah gasped, clutching Michael's arm. But there was no escape. Margaret listened, her chest light, as the judge concluded. "This court recognizes the enduring strength of a mother who refused to be discarded." As the gavel hit the desk, Margaret smiled, tears warming her cheeks. But these were tears of victory. Reporters surrounded her outside. "Margaret, what's next for you?" She smiled wide. "I'm going back to my cafe. I've got pies to bake, friends to laugh with, and a life that's finally mine again." Michael and Hannah walked past her, heads low. Defeated Margaret didn't gloat. She didn't taunt. She simply said, "I hope someday you understand the value of what you threw away." Back at the Seaside Comfort Cafe, the celebration was unforgettable. Mrs. Perkins danced to old jukebox hits. Mr. Doyle made terrible victory puns. Betty and Dot insisted Margaret needed a Justice Queen sash. Even Margaret couldn't help but laugh, realizing how far she'd come. Because in the end, justice wasn't just about reclaiming a house. It was about reclaiming herself. If you've ever been counted out, underestimated, or disrespected, remember Margaret. And if you want stories that remind you to fight back, subscribe now, because you deserve to hear stories where the good people win. But Margaret's journey wasn't just about revenge. It was about building something beautiful for others who needed hope too. And that was the most powerful chapter yet. Margaret stood on the porch of Seaside Comfort Cafe, the golden glow of the sunset reflecting off the ocean waves. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. Not just free from debt or betrayal, but free from the weight of other people's expectations. She wasn't just a woman who survived. She was a woman who conquered, who rebuilt, who created a life on her own terms. The community she once served now adored her. Locals called her Miss Margaret. Children waved when she passed by. Tourists snapped pictures with her famous victory pie. Her cafe wasn't just a business. It was a refuge. Every week, she set aside a table, called it the kindness table. Anyone struggling, single parents, lonely seniors, lost travelers could eat there for free. She remembered what it felt like to have no one, and vowed no one in her town would ever feel that invisible again. Word spread, articles were written, and soon, Seaside Comfort Cafe became a symbol of resilience, of hope, and of quiet strength. Mr. Lawrence beamed with pride whenever he stopped by. Betty and Dot insisted she write a book. From homeless to heroine, even Mrs. Perkins, who never liked anyone called Margaret, the best thing to happen to this town since bingo nights. And life felt full again. But the greatest surprise came one rainy afternoon. A young woman with tear-streaked cheeks walked into the cafe, Pushing a stroller, are you? Margaret Davis, she asked shyly. Margaret nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. I'm Lisa, Michael and Hannah's daughter. Margaret's heart skipped. The granddaughter. They never let her meet. Lisa's voice trembled. I found out everything they did. I left them. I didn't want to grow up learning their ways. I want to know the woman they betrayed. The woman who built everything from nothing. Margaret's lips trembled. Her hands reached out, tears welling in her eyes. She looked at the tiny baby cooing in the stroller and this little angel. Lisa smiled softly. Her name's Hope. That afternoon, Margaret sat at the kindness table, holding her granddaughter, sharing stories, passing down recipes, laughter, and wisdom. In that moment, she realized this was her true legacy. Not just bricks or buildings, not just court victories, but generations, learning love, honesty, and resilience. Years passed, Margaret grew older. Her hair turned silver, but her spirit stayed golden. Her cafe thrived, the community grew, and Lisa became like a daughter to her. On her 75th birthday, the town held a surprise party. A banner stretched across the Irma Hall. Here's to Margaret, proof that it's never too late to start again. As she stood there, surrounded by friends, family, and strangers who'd become family, Margaret felt no bitterness, no regret, just peace. She had been betrayed, abandoned, forgotten, but she turned it all into something beautiful. Her life wasn't a tragedy, it was a triumph. And for anyone watching, anyone who's been discarded or doubted or disrespected, Margaret's story is your reminder. You are not finished. You can rebuild. You can rise, because sometimes the best chapters come after the worst heartbreak. And whenever life gets heavy, whenever you need to hear about courage, hope, and redemption, subscribe and come back here, because we'll always have another story to lift you back up. Margaret's story is a reminder for all of us. It's never too late. As someone who studies stories of resilience and human spirit, I can tell you, Margaret's story is more than just a tale of betrayal and revenge. It's a lesson for every person who has ever been told they were too old, too weak, or too late to change their life. Margaret reminded us that even in the darkest moments, even when those closest to you turn their back, you can still stand tall, rebuild, and thrive. Her story shows us your worth doesn't disappear because someone fails to see it. Your future isn't determined by your past mistakes or by people who chose to discard you now. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment where you were underestimated but came back stronger? Do you believe it's possible to start fresh, no matter your age? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else watching this, and if Margaret's journey touched you, if it gave you hope, or simply reminded you of your own strength, make sure to subscribe so you never miss these powerful true stories, because we always have more stories of courage, redemption, and second chances. And if you want more, I recommend watching the next story right here, about a grandmother who turned her heartbreak into a multi-million-dollar success and stunned everyone who doubted her. Remember, you are never too old, never too broken to rise again. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.